I hope that came through on the audio.
Yeah.
That'll let you know what kind of Bitcoin Made Simple episode this is. This is a Bitcoin and beers. I have my friend and co-host for these episodes, Paul Malowitz. Paul, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How about yourself today?
Oh, not too bad. I have a fat lip because my child kneed me in the mouth uh while they were being crazy. I'll have to get into that, but other than that, all good. Before we get carried away, make sure you get a BitBox02 hardware wallet. Go to bitbox.swiss/Bitcoin Made Simple. Use promo code Bitcoin Made Simple to get 5% off. Um, so before we started recording, Paul and I were sharing stories, and I was talking about how I got tied up with the old, like back in the day, with the former Steelers players. Um, because my friends made rap beats that they sold to him, and then they won. Then the Steelers won the Super Bowl. He invited us to the party, and then the craziest thing was it was on MySpace. And remember how like the top friends on MySpace worked? And we still don't. We're like we still to this day are like, what? Why? But he had me and my one friend as top friends on
You can only
MySpace.
have like eight of them too, right?
Uh huh.
Something phone number.
It was like it was literally like me, my friend, and then like all NFL players that were like his top
You
friends.
were you were his rap guys.
And we're just like, all right, like I mean, whatever. Like, and then so then like and other NFL players started hitting us up and like friending us because like they were like, I mean, I guess these guys are like something nor somebody that we should pay attention to. Meanwhile, we were like living in our parents' houses, like um we're just like so we're such noobs, but yeah, that was so then I started telling Paul about how he was saying like, oh, back in your rap days, and I was like, well, we got to start recording because I was a rapper at one point. I'm ashamed, not ashamed to admit. Did you ever have any rap days back in the day?
I have never rapped.
I've told my wife before the shame of it is that we're good at writing lyrics, so that made us think that we'd be good at delivering them as well.
Turns
Uh,
out.
Turns out we were the whitest kids with the whitest possible rap delivery. Um, yeah, it was pretty embarrassing. Like some of my most horrific memories from high school are that we like had friends, like groups of girls, convinced to sit there and watch us freestyle battle each other. Like,
That's
at,
probably some of their most horrific memories too.
yeah, like it's they probably look back on it and blush for us. Like
They're
you
like,
ever have those
oh,
memories where you blush for somebody else? You're like, oh God, that was so embarrassing.
I was trying to be a groupie for that. Ouch.
I was wearing like we went to see 8 Mile and we were all wearing like, like skull caps, like looking in like, yeah, what's up? Like, yeah, what's up, bro? Um we laughed too because I remember my dad found like my like writing notebook one time and was like, Corey, what are these words you're saying in here? And I was like, Dad, we were like still laughing over, Dad, this is my super secret rap book. Like,
They're not words, Dad. They're lyrics.
you don't understand my generation, Dad. Oh, it was so bad. And then like we look our rap names were so bad. I think my first one was called I think it was Double Crosser.
It was like a
Um
backline Batman villain.
like that's really that's what it was. And
Never take me, Nightwing.
the
Which was
funny
your friend's rap name,
yeah,
probably.
the funny thing is my double crosser logo was a D and a C, but it looked like the Daredevil logo. Um and totally ripped it off because the Daredevil movie had probably just come out
Oh,
somewhere around then. And then I changed my rap persona to rhetorical reference. Like that makes no sense. Um, my one friend, his name was Art Ritas because he like put like a picture of himself like this, given like double peace sign, and someone said like somebody replied to it and said like, "Oh, it looks like you have arthritis. Or, like looks like you have arthritis and you should be called arthritis." And he was like, "Oh, that's a good name." And then later he was like, "I think that guy was making fun of me."
And that was the name of his album.
Yeah, it was arthritis. And then we had, let's see, 99 Omega. Uh, we
Was there
had
ever a time you thought you were going to make it? Where you're like, you know what? This is working out.
um for the briefest period we made one song and we all were like, like it's pretty sweet, and it was horrible. Um, but it was like it. I think it was the first. I think that's what really spawned them. Like, so my friends really went on and like sold a lot of beats. In so that's what like inspired that. But it was like all of a sudden like it was because they had made a rap beat that sounded like a legit rap beat, and our voices were in it, but we it was because of the rap beat that we were like, I think we're on to something here. And turns out it wasn't our rapping, it was the beat. But I mean, it ended up opening like some pretty cool opportunities. We went to the 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 Pittsburgh like hip hop awards, which isn't like a huge thing. But there was like, was it, what's the name of the band, the rap group? Um, it's
Wiz Khalifa's from out there, I think.
yeah. So at the oh, okay, so it was Grandmaster Flash was like the performer. So like the "Don't push me cuz I'm close to the edge." Um so they
See,
performed.
you still got it.
I know, right? I shouldn't stop. What was
You
I thinking?
still-
My wife still she'll like be like, "And yeah, remember when you were a rapper?" I'm like, shut up.
You're like, I'm just not in rap shape.
Yeah,
I was always a rapper. I still am.
I've never changed. I'm still a rapper.
The world passed me by.
I know. They don't understand my lyrics, Dad. Um and but yeah, so at that we were like sitting like a table away from Wiz Khalifa. Um that's the crazy part about it is like my friend, um I think he made beats for Wiz Khalifa back in the day, and like, it's one of those things like you're growing up and people are like, this guy's gonna be like the next big thing, and it's like we heard that like a million times, and then he actually did become like the next big thing, and you're like,
Oh,
oh, okay, that's pretty cool. Um, but yeah, it was weird days, weird days. It's probably why I didn't get too into comedy. Like I didn't pursue it further because I was gun shy from my rapping days.
you're like, I've already gone down this road of disappointment once.
Yeah, I can't get rejected again. Um,
Did any of your friends end up making videos for Wiz Khalifa? Because I knew somebody from Pittsburgh named Eric who had a bunch of Wiz Khalifa video stories.
I don't think so. No,
There's probably a competing crew with you then.
I know. Yeah, it was. We were Corey Scott and Jason from the 412, 412. 412. Uh, and yeah, that was they were probably a rival. They were probably a rival gang or something. Well, and then I mean, we were just like the whitest like kids in the world, and we would try to like go like I remember one time we were making like a video. We were trying to do like those rap documentaries, and like, we always joke about it. But like my friend was like, I was videotaping him from the passenger seat while he was driving. He was like smoking a cigarette, and like driving, and we were just going to get like McDonald's or something. But he was like, "Yeah, so I mean, like me and Phil, like we were doing this thing, and like going on and on." And then we like pull up to McDonald's, and he's like, hi, yeah, kind of a double cheeseburger. Okay,
He
thank
comes
you so
back,
much." And so, anyways, yeah, so as I was saying, we're like,
double cheeseburgers, the happiness food.
what? Like we would develop these accents whenever we were in like rap mode. It was so embarrassing. Oh my God. It's a miracle that out of the three of us, two of us are married and the other one is in a long-term relationship that basically is married. Um, because no girl should have paid attention to us.
No. And you all have compromat on each other for the rest of your lives.
Oh yeah, I mean, one of the names I said earlier, like in our rhetorical reference, they texted it earlier today because I changed my fantasy football team to shit stack. It's like my name now, and they said, "Oh, I thought it was gonna be rhetorical reference." Um, but have you seen the video of that guy, that golfer, ripping his shirt off
No.
and like going nuts? I'll find. Ooh, this is a Zoom call, so I can share it.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
so this guy just loses his mind. I shared it in the recording that I did the last podcast, but let's see. This guy just loses his mind. Um,
Are all the comments like about Happy Gilmore and stuff? Happy Gilmore, but for real.
so I'll give you the backstory. This dude, he, this guy is accused of stealing their golf, like some one of this other group's golf ball, and he's denying it. And they're like, "Dude, just you know, give her the golf ball back." And then all of a sudden, he just flips out and takes his shirt off and has this reaction. Let me see. Advanced sharing options. Okay. Share screen. Um, let's see. Share. No, no,
The rap's coming out. That's the beginning of the beat.
Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay. This is the dude just losing his mind. Pull it up. Tell me if you can hear
No audio, but the visual's amazing.
it.
Wow.
He just loses his mind. Now I gotta let me see if I can. How do you share the audio? Advanced computer audio. There we go. All right.
Computer
You'll be
sound has
you
been
won't be able
shared.
to you won't be able to see it, but you'll be able to hear.
Walter?
Walter?
Oh, here we go.
You see that?
Oh.
Dr. Doodle's been to heaven, bitch, and you want to test God? You fucking come get it, shit stack.
Okay, he's mentally.
It's stack.
Like you want to test God? Come come and get it, shit stack.
Guys like the Randy Savage of golf faux pas.
Yeah. It was it, so yeah, I I I did that. I changed my name to, or I changed my team to that dude, um, and changed the name to Shit Stack. Because I was like, what a great insult for a person's name, Shit Stack. So anyways, yeah, but they were like, I thought you were gonna be rhetorical reference, but
No, shit stack is better.
yeah. So anyways, what's up with you? What's new?
The the golf video made me think of my small town recently passed an ordinance where you can just ride golf carts around. And so
Really?
yeah, there's like a golf course like kind of not across the street, but like across the way, like really close. to us, and there's like one street you're not allowed to ride your golf cart on because it's like sort of like one of those like Route 66 type roads.
Yeah.
And everywhere else, like I'll just be sitting on my computer all day, and then just some kids will come on a golf cart, and then some old people will come with like all their bags and stuff, and it's just like I don't even need a car here. Like I could go to the grocery store with a golf cart, and it's
That's
pretty
awesome.
great. They also passed an ordinance that you can bow hunt on your own property in the city as long as you have 5 acres because
Oh,
of the deer. And it was great going to the grocery store and the lady going, I'm not sure about bow hunting in the city. But
I love too how they'll refer to it as the city, you know,
yeah,
like as if it's a city. Um, that's do you have 5 acres?
no, I only have like a third of an acre. I
Mm.
wish. So I can't bow hunt on my yard, unfortunately.
I mean,
I've got to make it up in growing tomatoes.
yeah, maybe one of these days. I if I can just convince my son to let me kill an animal, that's his big thing. He's not too thrilled about that idea. Although we lost a chicken.
Oh no.
So yes, our kids are devastated, but we're not a we think a hawk got it, but it was one of the ones was called an Easter egger. Um and she was without a doubt the like top of the pecking order, and um and she would just go like the rest of them kind of stay in one or two clumps together as they go
Mhm.
around the yard, and she would always go off on her own, and she'd be further and further than everyone and pushing the limits. So what I'm telling myself is that she went out there and is just living a happy life in the woods, um and just got lost.
Like
uh
Into the Wild.
yeah,
There's like a
exactly.
Pearl Jam song playing, and she's just went for it.
Except in Into the Wild, he ended up dead, right?
Yeah.
So that's but yeah, so
Possibly killed by a hawk. No, I don't know.
yeah, he might have been. But yeah, that yeah, we lost one, but yeah, bow hunting. I want to do that. I want to get into it.
Yeah, I feel like because I lived in the city for like an actual city for like 20 years, I just feel way behind in doing adult things. And
Hmm.
that's why when you were like, oh, I've got chickens and I like built a coop, I was like, yeah, like I don't know how to do that. Like I can grow plants in my basement and like I want to make mead this Christmas, but bow hunting would be really sweet.
Yeah, like gut your own deer.
Yeah, I had a friend who texted me. He's like, "We got a deer the other day," and then so I asked him like 20 follow-up questions as if it was like I was a reporter for National Geographic or something. I'm like, "How does one do this?
What do you do with the deer? Where do you put the innards?
How many pounds are they?"
And so the um mead, like that's basically beer, right?
Yeah, it's like you can make it from honey. There was another podcast episode I listened to that was how to make mead, and there's people here that sell just giant jars of honey for like $20.
Huh.
So I figured I'll just take a shot. And then when the apocalypse comes, I can have a trade good
Yeah.
because being a computer person is probably not going to help in the apocalypse.
Yeah, I
You're like,
know.
listen to my podcast. It's episode 7.
I,
I'll give you 4 listens for a chicken.
I look at my skill set for the apocalypse. I'm like, boy, oh boy, I got a lot of work to do. Because yeah, nobody's gonna be. Hey, go to mymoviesplus.com. Use promo code Corey. That is over your ham radio. You have to go dash dash long dash short dot. Like
Let
that's
us in your fortress. There is a promo code.
that'll be the new way. That'll be the new way for shillers and scammers to make money over ham radios. They'll be like, use promo code, and it'll just be like some like dash dash long dash dot dot dot. It'll just be some
Breaching
Morse code.
noise.
There'll
Not
be
sure if it's ionosphere interference. Dash.
there'll be some person sitting there like they have to like keep track of all of them. They're like, oh man, like
Oh.
You know
That was a dot, not a dash.
that
Oh,
Jack Pasovic got another My Pillow sold.
oh
I'd
my God.
pick on him just because I know he hawks the My Pillow. I'd mute him. I just like I can't.
We're bringing back democracy. One thing that used to be in the Sears catalog at a time.
Oh, it's so bad. Like I'm just I can't stand like it's taking every ounce of my energy to not make fun of the right because they're such
They're all, yeah.
they're
It's weird
losers.
to me that people don't want to talk about like what's happening. Like there's like a small group of people, like when I talk to you, you're like, oh yeah, I'm aware that things are messed up. And everybody else is like, no, like that's bad news. And then they don't want, like, I try to talk to family about it and I'll be like, hey, like maybe you should just be ready in case we have, issues. And they're like, oh, you're always trying to get us down. I'm like, okay.
Or I'm just trying to be realistic, one or the other.
I
The
understand math and I know some things about money.
well, I mean, so I started following like it was weird. I think I was like averse to following anyone that talked about anything financially that wasn't Bitcoin because you're like, oh, it's going to be a scam. But I saw this one pop up. It was like a used or he was like a car dealership guy and
Oh, I think I know what on Twitter.
yeah, yeah, on Twitter.
Yeah, that's an interesting account. It's like a cartoon icon or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, let me check this out. And like he's been sharing stuff of like with the auto workers strike going on that like the used car market's going crazy again, which is, you know, mind boggling. And then I was looking through the comments and one of the people commenting said like I guess they own like a car dealership or something like that. And they I think the way it works is they have like auctions that they have to go to every week and that's where they can like pick up inventory of used cars and he was like I sent I sent my person with like numbers for all these different cars and that I thought were like absurd. Like I can't believe I'm gonna pay this price for this car. Like
Hmm.
and I came out like under a thousand. I was under by $1,000 every time. Like
Oh my
I
God.
wasn't paying enough, and it's like I don't know. Like I mean, how many times can we tell our friends and family that things are broken and it's gonna get ugly?
Yeah. And I mean, it's not like a really attractive message, but it's also like, I like football, but people talk a lot more about the Lions than about things in their own self-interest where I live. And it's just like, yeesh.
Yeah, like
But hey, the Lions.
like have you seen that meme of uh it's like whatever something about like apocalyptic like you know financial situation or whatever and then it's like no way, well, did you catch the game last night? And it's like a guy like standing at a grill flipping burgers and it's like which is funny because if anybody's seen on my Twitter like I'm talking a lot more about sports than I used to. um but yeah, I'm still obviously paying like very close attention to Bitcoin. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird to me. Like, what do you think is going to be the aha moment for people that aren't Bitcoiners when they go like, oh, okay, like it's actually
You know,
broken.
I used to think that it was like an aha moment. And like, you can look at history and it's like when people can't afford like food and stuff, which we're getting close to, things tend to go bad. But I actually think it's more like there's just this line that just keeps getting harder and harder to be above. And then people are like, well, at least it's not me. And then there's other people that are like, well, I got to keep, like it's like a phase shift as opposed to like, it would be almost great if there was like this binary thing and it was just like, oh, the audit happened and people know now. But like, I don't think that people are interested in knowing. So it has to be sort of like a drip by drip, their own
Mm.
personal life. And you think about somebody that's like maybe a neighbor or somebody that has a tragedy, like, oh, that's a tragedy. But then in general, like people just keep living. So I'm just kind of concerned that it's just going to be like not good. Like that's what it felt like
Hmm.
when I lived in Los Angeles. Like when I moved there at first, it was like I was working at the mall and things were expensive, but it was just like somehow I was getting by. And then by the end, it was like my wife and I both worked at like a movie studio, and like we had one kid in an apartment, and it was just like, how do people eat at restaurants? You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
like I think it's going to be sort of a ramp that way. And that might be why people don't want to talk about it either. Because it's like I don't want to talk about it and be like, it's gonna be this thing. But I just like to just talk about like, hey guys, what do you think's happening? Like,
Yeah.
like let's
Hey,
talk
like,
about
notice
it,
the
like how
shit's
we'll
going
talk about
down.
game 6 of the playoffs tomorrow. Like maybe they'll have good pitching and they'll win, or maybe they will lose because like, but nobody really wants to consider just a general portfolio of the future unless it's about the playoffs.
Yeah, and like that's part of actually um ended up like recording one today because I was like, like I ended up an idea hit me and I was like, oh well, that's perfect. I'll record one and then Paul and I will just hang out later and shoot the shit and record one. But I was talking about do you know Maslow's hierarchy?
Yeah,
And
hierarchy of
so
needs.
yeah, so I was like the hierarchy of needs. I was talking about that and I was kind of equating. I think it came in from like I was talking about. Have you seen all like the fights at sporting events that are like breaking out? Like terrible. Like a Patriots fan died, and like
I didn't know about this.
yeah, like and I'm just seeing all over like Twitter, like all these fights at NFL games, and it's just like I was thinking about like you know when you look at the hierarchy of needs, it's like I feel like people are using like as society declines, the importance of sports goes up because it replaces like to me, I think it's like
Yeah,
replacing something in their life.
yeah, it's I mean, I've definitely had times when I was really depressed, and so I was like, oh, I have to watch the Tigers every night because there's a continuity of sorts between family that I care about, and I like this when I'm little, and I liked it. Hopefully, I like when I'm big. I think you're right, and I think that like because if you're not part of a cohesive group, it lets you have a group affiliation. It lets you keep up with the story, and it's not just a movie that has a predetermined outcome. It's like you can actually feel like you're a part of sort of an existing engine that's driving this somewhere.
Yeah, like it's almost and it gives you that like sense of belonging,
Mm-hmm.
you know, where you're like we always joke in Pittsburgh about like if you watch a Pittsburgh plane, like a plane come into Pittsburgh International, it's like 50% of the people on the plane getting off are wearing black and gold. Like it's just and like the one guy on like one of the local radio shows, he always says he's like it's like our school uniform so that we can spot each other in the wild. We're like, hey, there you
This
are.
guy.
Like and in a way that's cool because
Yeah.
like I could go to the parking lot before a Steelers game wearing a Steelers jersey, and every single person there that's wearing the same colors as me, we're all going to be friends, even though we
Mm-hmm.
probably have different ideologies or whatever. So there's something cool about that. But yeah, it's this weird thing of like
Yeah.
where,
I'm not anti-sports either. And I agree with you. Like it feels good to like show up at the parking lot and it's your dad's team and hopefully your kid likes it. Unlike my kid who literally wrote none for favorite sports when they did a survey at school, broke my heart. But like when it sort of replaces like I started like realizing how much like I watched like all I think I watched every Tiger baseball game one year, and it was like I was like in my 20s. It wasn't
yep.
obviously I wasn't dating anyone at the time
Yeah, yeah,
by a lot,
yeah,
and like, but it's just like, well, I go home and I catch the game because it's free, and it's just like, well, how many hours do I work and how many hours is the game? And then, you're like eating, bathroom, washing the dishes. And then you're like, well, I guess I just work. And then I hope that Jeremy Bonderman finds his changeup this year, which never happened. So it's like
That's so
it's not bad. Like, but you're right. Like, I would love to be in a society where it's just like, oh man, we just get together around ideas and like, who cares about like who's selling pillows for what political side? But at the same time, it's just like they're trying to replace meat with like oil that comes from from bugs and like like what like a Saifedean post, like,
yeah.
and it's just like that's not good. And to your point about the fights at sports games, it kind of makes me think of like in chemistry, if you have you mix a few chemicals and there's a slow amount of reaction, and if you add heat to it, the molecules bounce around more, so suddenly you get more collisions and you get bigger reactions, and or the reaction acts more quickly. And like to me it seems like maybe that's what's happening. There's these people that just show up to a sporting event or in a mall or in a group, and it's like they've already got like the heat from what's going on in their life, and it's not so much that it's about like that slight then and there, or that the Buffalo Bills guy scored a touchdown and you didn't like how the guy cheered. It's just like you're already moving so quick in that sort of emotional state, it causes a collision more easily.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, and I kind of likened it to like you're at this like heightened state of awareness where you're like more in survival mode,
Yeah.
because like everybody right now is in survival mode.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, expenses are absurd, and it sucks because I'm like right now, based on how things are going, like I should probably be actually. I mean, I'm like I should be in theory being able to put more money away, but like instead it's like, well, like it's almost we're like kind of scraping, but like we're doing okay.
Get it?
Um, but like we're not like we're our heads above water for the moment.
Yeah, but you
Like,
have to add the from the moment,
yeah,
because who
it's like
knows where the how the water will rise,
yeah, like it's
and then
gonna
we'll be
it's gonna
below the
keep getting
line.
deeper, and like so it's like we keep having to add like chain. It's almost like we're chained to the bottom of the water, like to the bottom of the water, and we can't. The water keeps rising, so it's like okay, I guess we need to find ways to add more chains to this, or more links to this chain, so that we,
Hmm.
in the event that the water rises again, we'll still. And it's just this never ending. Like, I mean, I know that I mean, we wouldn't like we have more kids than we did, and like especially whenever like our second born was like breastfeeding, for however long, which is like my wife does a good job with that. So like he
That's
was,
tough too.
hmm
That's a really good for kids. Much
yeah,
credit to her.
oh yeah, and like I mean, obviously he starts eating real food at some point, and um, but I looked at, I was like, man, like our monthly, month to month, like what I would count in my head, where I'd go like, okay, how much cash do we have? Divide that by, this number, and that's how long we have till we're in like completely destitute. I don't know if
Hmm.
you ever do that in your head.
Oh, I do that all the time. Yeah,
Yeah, it's like,
and it's weird because we probably both have similar but different downside scenarios. Because like, people listen to you and they're like, oh my god, he's a big time podcaster and the CEO of My Movies
uh-huh,
Plus. Like, he's a CEO, and you're like, yeah, but like I gotta save my money. And you're like, I've got like all these business expenses and things I'm gonna take care of. That could go bust at any time because you're trying to sell directly to people that are
yeah.
maybe more affected than even you. And then I'm like, well, my wife and I have jobs, and it's just like we keep having, like our industry's not doing well. And it's just like,
Is that day gonna come that the pay
yeah,
slip
and it's
comes
just a
in?
day and it changes everything. And exactly like you said, it's like you just do the math and you're like, okay, I've got this, and this is what we spend. And then like is there any way that I can unsubscribe from something, or like, and so you
Hmm.
just keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller and convincing yourself that like it's the same. But
It's
I try to really buy things that like when I'm feeling flush, buy things that will endure and hopefully help me have money over time. Like I would much rather spend like $20 on like material for a garden that's going to last me like 10 years or however
yeah,
long the sun doesn't eat it to shit. And it's like, okay, well, I can have tomatoes for 10 summers, but like, I detest eating out other than the food is great. You know what I mean?
oh
Like
yeah, yeah.
it's just like it's gone.
It's like
So
you
when you
spent
look at
that
your
money and
expenditures,
it's and it goes
yeah.
out the window, and you're like, oh my god, like that was you know we have like these things like there was like a like series of summer events, and one of them like the last one was last night, and we went to it, and I was just like all right, this is gonna cost a penny, like there's gonna be cash coming out, which it goes to local businesses, so like you feel
Sure.
good about that. um but yeah, I mean, I just look at like I'm like, oh my god, like you know what our overhead used to be versus what it is now is
Hmm.
absurd. In like it really didn't change that much. Like I've mentioned this before, but like, when we moved, our mortgage went up, I don't want to give like, you know, specific numbers out, but however, the amount that our mortgage went up, we were paying our kid to go to a private school because the public school was horrible. Like we were in the city, so like
Hmm.
we weren't going to go there.
Right.
And um and so the price of private school was half of the increase in our mortgage. So it was like, okay, like I mean, it was like this basically only going up like, half of that. Because we were spending that money anyways, but now we don't
Right.
have to because
You have
we
to
don't
think of
have
it
to
as a
pay for private school.
portfolio of expenditures.
And then like I realized like when the second one started going to school, like, oh, like that would have been if we had stayed there, like we'd
Yeah.
be paying right now the same amount of money every month,
Hmm.
but in a much smaller, worse house in like in the city.
Yeah, and then all your other stuff would cost more too, I'm assuming, because
Oh yeah. I mean, like our, like basic expenses out here are much less. And it's nice too because you like drive on the road and you see like a farm stand. And
oh, I
you're like,
love that so
oh,
much.
like let's just swing by there and pick up some, you know, fresh produce. And although the corn was weird this year. Oh no, we didn't have like really good sweet corn. Like I only had it like once or twice.
This year, the rain was bad here, and I
Yeah, it
heard
was
that
here
we had
too.
to bring corn in from Indiana for some of the early harvest season type stuff. Like I don't know if there's like harvest hayride type stuff or whatever. I was at some small country store, and it's
Hmm.
cool being at a place where like they talk about stuff like that, and it's just like, oh, this year they're crops, and it's like real information.
Yeah, yeah, which is what they're trying to get rid of. And
Yeah.
I mean, we know that more than anybody. Yeah, it's just crazy. Like, so then you sit there as like a Bitcoiner, and you're like, I don't know, like I feel like I've seen a meme like this, or if not, it's been in my head, and somebody should create it. But it's just like you're sitting there looking at all the stuff melting, and then it's like, how do you act at like family functions? And you
Yeah.
just sit there, you're like, you have your arms crossed, like, how do I tell everyone that this is all about to crumble and fall into a bunch of pieces and be a complete
It's
suck?
weird because you feel like simultaneously crazy, but also you're totally right about the specific things that you're thinking. So it's like I remember when I used to like do stand up, like people be like, "Oh, how are you doing in Los Angeles, Paul?" And I was like, "Well, I can tell you a version of the story where like I went to these clubs and played with these people, and it sounds like I'm totally making it.
Yeah.
And it's like, or I could tell you my fears and how much money I've made doing stand-up comedy, and then you're like, come home. And,
Yeah.
and it feels like that for Bitcoin too, because you're just like, okay, well, like here is like mathematically like why, we're going to have these it's not even like Bitcoin is the solution, is my Lord and Savior or whatever.
Yeah.
Regardless of, I mean, let's be honest, it is, other than the religious thing I said.
Yeah.
But like it's like, oh well, what horse are you betting on? Like it's a horse race, and you're like, are you gonna bet on this money that just keeps just printing more? And when you learn how like fiat money works, like everyone should read the fiat standard. Like I wish I would have read that when I was 20, because I would have bought a house in Los Angeles, and then I would have been able to retire now because I would have just financed something in the up and coming city that I lived in, and learned that it was like not a bad bet at the time and interest rates were so low. Um, but like you're like, okay, well, this monetary supply is going to absolutely completely expand no matter what. They have
Mhm.
to, otherwise it's going to blow up and be worth nothing anyway. And you're like, okay, well, I can't do that. And then you're like, well, what about the bonds? And then you start getting into, like you were talking about, other finance people, like the car guy, and you start getting into like, you hear Preston Fish talk about bonds and stuff, and you're like, oh my God, they're going to have to buy a lot of their own bonds.
Yeah.
And like, wait a second, if I can't make enough money to pay stuff, and then so I just have to issue debt, I have to borrow from people and issue coupons to give them more money later, but nobody wants to coupons, and I have to, and it's more nuanced than that. There's other economies that are going to crash before ours because they have crappier currencies. But you're like, this isn't a good idea. And then you just come to like just checking things off, and you're like, well, as long as there's not a catastrophic error in the code, or the government doesn't come to my house and shoot me in the head, like this is probably the one. So you're at the family event, and you're like, well, this is. But then if you're just talking about your crazy internet money, they're like, it's you're bless his heart kind of a deal.
Yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
you just sit there and you wait for somebody to come to you, and you're like, yep, still not broke.
It's funny too, like especially now that I'm, really leaning into the like mining off of natural gas. And like I explain that to family, and it's just like, like they're like, wait, so there's this natural gas? I'm like, yep. What do you do with it? I'm like, well, I'm gonna put generators there, and then those generators turn on and turns it into electricity, which then mines the Bitcoin. Why don't they sell the gas to the pipeline? Because there's no pipeline there.
Why
Okay.
don't they make a pipeline?
Yeah. Why don't they make it? Because they can't. Okay. And they're like, well, how is the Bitcoin mined? You're like, well, that's a bigger discussion, but here we
Yeah,
go.
everything
And
is like level 10.
yeah, it's like you like explain that, and they're just staring at you, and they're like, so how do you make money? And it's just
Yeah,
um, like how do I explain that? Basically, I mean, I'm using like just making up numbers, but it's like it costs me, you know, $4,000 to generate something that costs $27,000. That's how I make money. Like it's
yeah,
like
and then they're like, that's too good to be
yeah,
true.
exactly. They're like, well, that sounds like a scam, and you're like,
Yeah, I have a family
uh,
member who I hope never hears this because I love him, but he is a reporter, and he reported on energy and the environment in like Texas and stuff. And I remember telling him about sort of the um like the mining of flared gas and stuff, because he told me about like these open rigs or pits or whatever the heck they are that are
yeah,
just leaking gas, and there's no economic incentive to cap them ever pre Bitcoin. And I remember like learning about this stuff in like, I don't know, 2017 or 18, when like Marty Bent started talking about it.
hmm
And I was like, this is amazing. And I'm like, even if it just partially subsidizes it, and you're like just trying to do it for charity, it makes charity cheaper, and it's not going to be partially, because I understood the economics of it. And it was like, and he was just like, just like, I don't know if it was just an uncuriousness, or maybe I was just explaining it poorly, or like wrong political side. But it was just like, once something is tainted, it's just like, wow. And it's just like, meanwhile, it's like, well, we got to change all of our energy in the whole world, and like carbon and stuff. And it's like, well, with Bitcoin, you could just set up a mine by a waterfall in the middle of nowhere, Africa, and give all those people clean power, and then have external energy that you essentially printed into money.
Mm-hmm.
And there would not have to be logistics to get the power there, where they lost, there was loss over, distance and stuff. And it's just like, but you're right, it's like this, it simultaneously sounds too good to be true, and then you have to get into like multiple corners of like, why is it even worth anything, or like, well, if it's so great, why isn't everybody doing it? And it's like, well, everybody's not doing it because you're literally in an emotional fight with me about the subject right now, because you're,
Yeah.
like, everybody else is like that too. And it's just like, yeah, it's really difficult. And like, I actually wanted to ask you, like, because you were talking about like things aren't great, and like, are you an accelerationist, or are you like I hope it's the slowest possible? Because I go back and forth, because you can get like, if it's slow, we can all get all the Bitcoin, and maybe the fall won't be from as high. But then part of it is just like, I don't want things to just continually get worse until my 9-year-old autistic kid has to like be an adult,
Yeah.
like, that's no good. So like, where's your stance on that?
Um, huh. I'm like stuck in the middle. You mind if I pause real quick?
Yeah.
I'm gonna go grab more beer and take a leak.
All right, I'll be back as well. Real talk. Do you cut this part out, or is there like going to be a 5-minute plot? Oh, sorry.
What's that?
I said, and we're still recording, and I said, real talk. Do you cut the part out, or will there be a 5-minute lag in the podcast where we will get to look at your Stanley Cup trophies?
Yeah. No, I will cut that part out, I think.
Because my favorite part of podcasts is when like somebody's like, hey bro, I've got to go to the bathroom, let's pause it and I'll cut this part out, and the other person's like, okay, and then they go, and then you hear like flush, and then someone's like yelling at their wife, and okay, I'm making the last part up, but all the other stuff's
Yeah.
true. And then they come back and they're like, well, we're back, don't worry, I'll cut that out. You
Yeah,
can do
no.
whatever you want on your podcast. I'm not trying to preemptively guilt you into cutting out your 5 minutes of Stanley Cups, but
No, I will cut that out. Um and that is funny. The people, I might keep this conversation part in.
that's fine. But they never cut out the part that they say they'll cut out. And
Yeah.
then you're like sitting there and you're like, I am filling out my spreadsheet for work, and this podcast is supposed to keep giving me life.
Yeah. This
Do I
podcast
pause
is
it?
supposed to
Like,
keep
I
me.
can't pause it. Then I'll lose my spot in the cells, and it's just anarchy, and the Russians take over America, which apparently is what they're trying to convince us of right now. Even though we can't make bullets to fight the fake war we're in.
Yeah, exactly. Um so where do we pick up?
So, are you
Oh,
an accelerationist, or I mean, I don't have a firm opinion. I just thought it was an interesting
Yeah.
thing to talk
No,
about.
no.
Some people do have firm opinions on it.
Well, it's like part of me thinks it's not going to go as fast as most people want.
I agree.
Are you talking about the Bitcoin price or other things as well?
I think just kind of, well, I think the Bitcoin price, I mean, it'd be great if a bunch of Bitcoiners just had a lot of capital to change the world, like starting tomorrow. Like, I'm game for that. Realistically, like, if it's like, if it pumps like 10x or 20x, it won't be a big deal. But if we go like Weimar hyperinflation, that would be awful, because then we would be then I would be driving to your place, siphoning gasoline, asking if I can please eat a chicken. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, but like, I guess I asked a friend this, and I gave like a crappy answer because I was like, well, like if things really start heating up and going bad, like I'd like another 2 years to prepare or whatever, because it's like I've moved since then. Maybe I'll get better at gardening. Maybe I'll buy more Bitcoin, especially that one. But then he was like, well, his kids are the same age as our kids. And he's like, well, I don't want everything to go to hell for them when they're in like high school. And like, I'm like, oh,
Mm.
that's true too. So it's sort of like a better in my time or better in their time question. But then if it's in their time, you've got the time to like get yourself ready, as it were. I don't think there's a
Yeah.
good scenario, but
I don't know. Like, I look at it, I think I've been looking at it lately as like my role is to get, like, I don't know. Yeah, because you don't want them to go through the hard part.
yeah.
Like, that would suck if it happens like right when they turn 18 or something like that. You know what I mean? Um, or probably even worse would be like if they were like early 20s and just, got their own place or something.
Yeah,
And you're
exactly.
like,
It's like,
oh,
welcome to shit.
yeah, welcome to this shithole.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know. I mean, it was funny because I was having this conversation. I mean, with mining on natural gas, where I was explaining, like, you know, in the event that the price of Bitcoin went down catastrophically, it would actually be more profitable as an off-grid
Yes.
miner
Because everybody
because,
would drop off, right?
yeah, because their break-even points are
Hmm.
so much higher. Um, and so you're like the miner of last resort. And so in my mind, I was like, well, like I wouldn't hate it if that happened, like because you'd just stack a shitload more Bitcoin, um and it would let this play out a little bit longer. Like, really, like the best case scenario would be if this transition happens between now and like when like you and I retire, you know.
Yeah. Kind of slowly, so nobody gets hurt with a giant drop. I mean, people are getting hurt now, and I don't want to minimize it. I mean, we just
Yeah.
talked about that. But like, there's a difference between, you know, grocery stores can't pay trucks for the food that gets brought on, and like, you know,
Yeah.
it's just expensive food.
By the way, if anyone is watching the video and can see, yes, this is my name on the bottom of the mug. Um, and I didn't do that because I need to remember that it's mine here. But this was so the microbrewery that opened by my parents' house right whenever I turned 21. Perfect timing. Um, I say I grew up. That's why I can't drink like Miller Lite or anything like that because that is all pre 21 to me. Like, and then as soon as I turned 21, this bar opened and they had like 25 beers, like that they were all like brewed on location. And so, anyways, I was as a fresh 21-year-old in college, I was part of the mug club. If you
Dude,
join,
that's how you become a man.
yeah, if you join the mug club, it was, I think, $60, and you got the like, normal draft. If you weren't in the mug club, was in a 16 ounce. This is a 20 ounce.
Ooh.
Um, and then they would have like, it was like mug on like Mondays. If you were in the mug club, all beers all day were like $2.75. Um, and then, uh, what was the like? Oh, then once a year they would have a mug club party, and it was
And you're
like,
like, I'm somebody.
huh,
I am
exactly,
a mover and a shaker. I have my own money, mom, and I used
huh.
it for this mug.
I know, like, just wonder what my parents were thinking when they were like, oh,
Back when
oh,
$60 could buy you something, like
yeah,
the membership of a mug club,
yeah,
now it's like 4 beer.
yeah, they're like, oh, he's probably gonna live here forever. That's probably what my parents were thinking.
Yeah.
They're like, there's
He's not going to figure out how to arbitrage energy for Bitcoin mining. That's for
no,
sure.
yeah,
We've got a slow one.
yeah, and so it's funny because then I started dating my wife a little bit after that, and I told her like, oh, like because they would hang like your mug would hang
Mhm.
above the bar.
Oh, did you take her around to impress her? Where you're like, hey, it's up there,
Thankfully, I wasn't trying
babe.
to impress her. I'm like, hey, babe, look at that. How impressed are you that my name? But she,
Too bad this jukebox isn't connected to MySpace. There's some beats that I made that could go.
did I tell you some former NFL players were all over my MySpace because that was a big deal back then. But she had like known about the Mug Club. We were dating for maybe a month or something like that. And I remember we go to the bar and they like come over like, hey Corey, what do you want? And I tell them which one I'm choosing that night. And they like go over and they're looking, up in like the rafters for like the mug and they
Jeez,
find it and they, fill it up and they bring it over and she sees my name on the bottom and she goes, oh, like you have a mug. Like it's the same,
-2.
like, yeah, it's the same mug every time. And I was like, uh-huh, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's isn't that cool? And she was like, not as cool as you think.
You're like, no, but you get 20 ounces, and then there's some days, and she's just like,
every
stop talking. I think you're cute. You played hockey.
Yeah, every 4 beers you get a free one basically because it's like for 4 beers at 16 ounces that's like 64 ounces, but if you have 4 beers at 20, it's like, yeah, it's like 5 beers. That's like you're in.
It's value, just it's value. And she's like, yeah, it was value to destroy your liver. And you're like, I love you. Please
Yeah,
be with me and help me.
please get me out
Oh,
of
but
this
you
situation.
do.
This I'm on this rapid path towards going nowhere. Please save me from it.
I've worn some Super Bowl rings. Just take me away and I'll tell you about it.
I've worn 5 of the 6. I swear, if I can find the 6th, I'll wear it. Will that impress you? Oh, it's funny. Oh shit, what were we talking about? Because I really got
Oh,
sidetracked.
I should say you told the Super Bowl ring story before the podcast. So Corey has worn
No,
all.
I think I told that on the podcast.
Oh, was it the beginning? Okay, my
Yeah,
bad.
yeah, okay, yeah,
We've worn all but one. Let's
all
just
but
put it out
one.
there. We've been talking for a while. We've been in the Mug Club ourselves. So
We should start a not that try and piggyback off of Steven Crowder, who I think is annoying.
it is.
Um,
But he was from Ann Arbor. So when I lived in Los Angeles, I was like, what if I lived in my homeland again? That guy's successful, even though I think he's kind of weird.
yeah. Well, how crazy is it? Like, not to like gossip, but like, he was like, I'm like the, Christian and, blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden he's like going through this divorce and like
Yeah.
seems like a real dick. And you're like,
There's all the weird stuff between like I don't I follow rightist stuff more than leftist stuff, but it's only because like the leftist stuff is like your mouth is held open and then there's a fire hose that just shoots you in the face.
yeah,
So you know what sort of that point of view is. So then I'll follow some like rightist stuff, and then it's just like, oh, okay, this is what those guys are saying. And then like, they're both nuts, but like, yeah, like so that's my disclaimer for why I know about this, I guess.
yeah,
But you're talking about him saying he was a Christian, and you're Catholic, right?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so like I consider myself Catholic, but I'm going to a Presbyterian church. I'm trying to get my wife in there, and like
You're
my
trying to
mom's a
get her to,
Catholic.
you're trying to get her to become Catholic.
No, well, just Christian. I married
Oh,
a girl who's a hippie from the woods,
oh, nice.
literally Humboldt County, like when Northern California. When you go like when you say Northern California, people go San Francisco, and it's like no, that's halfway there, and Humboldt County is the other half, and then there's like advertisements on billboards for like cutting pot and trimming it and stuff.
Wow.
But anyway, my wife's awesome. But she was raised by hippies in the woods, and her parents are like, or her cousin literally ran the Planned Parenthood of like that whole area.
Oh
And my
wow.
mom is a Catholic church organist. So when we got together, and my mom, we got together and we had a Las Vegas wedding. And then that's how my mom met her family, that
Oh
we got
wow.
married in Las Vegas. And so that was quite the sitcom episode.
Yeah.
But anyway, so my wife, having been raised in California and Humboldt County, but being of sound mind, has moved to the Midwest. And she's just like, wait, there were a lot of people lying about a lot of things, or just people were naive and maybe not bad actors, but so like, so we're going to a Presbyterian church is like kind of halfway. So
Hmm.
anyway, that's my long into the religion thing. But I wanted to ask you, so like being raised Catholic and going to Catholic school and having a Catholic church organist mom, you're familiar with the Catholic guilt, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And you're just like,
Very
oh
real.
man, like I don't know if I'm a good enough Catholic. And I realized the other day that like I have like Bitcoin guilt that feels like the Catholic guilt. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just like, I think I'm like a pretty good Bitcoiner, but like I could be a better
I
Bitcoiner.
think I
Like,
spend too much money on other stuff.
yeah, and not even just that, but like for the glory of Bitcoin, like I clearly spend too much money on other stuff. You see this? I have books, which
Yeah.
is like you've got trophies. What are
Yeah.
you doing?
I know.
But like,
Don't tell Bitcoiners those trophies. And by the way, they were pre-Bitcoin for me.
but you didn't
Those
sell
are
them, and you're
those
sitting
are
in a chair
50
that you
bucks a
didn't sell.
piece. Yeah.
Yeah. But so like it's like sometimes I'm like I'm not a good enough Bitcoiner. Like I ran a node and it was an Umbrel, and I don't know how to like, I'm not really a great techie person, and it kept crashing. And I think it's because it was a crappy Raspberry Pi that the power source isn't great and it just
Hmm.
keeps forking. And then so I flashed that, and then I was like, okay, I'll run the start 9 node. And then and the same thing keeps happening because I'm using the same equipment because I'm cheap, because I'm supposed to spend my money on Bitcoin because
Uh-huh.
that's what they tell me.
Yeah.
But then I'm just
That's
like,
everything
I'm
the
not a
internet
good,
says. Like,
I could be a better Bitcoiner because I could be running a node right now instead of having the pieces to kind of run a node. And then there's a lot of other things like that. Like I have a t-shirt that says Bitcoin, but I never wear it anywhere because I don't want someone to hit me with a wrench and take all my Bitcoin. And
yep.
I looked at it because I was like going to be on this podcast, and I was like, well, they're going to know I'm a Bitcoiner. And it said cryptocurrency on it. And I was like,
Ooh,
are we allowed to say that now?
that's a
And I was
dirty
just
word.
like, I'm a Bitcoiner, but I could be a better Bitcoiner, just like I could be a better Catholic.
Yep.
It's
That's a
weird
really
parallels to the guilt.
that is a very I honestly would not have put that together, but that is very accurate.
I've been thinking
Um
about it a lot lately.
it is like it's like a similar, for example, if we didn't go to church on Sunday, we were like, it's the same thing
Mm-hmm.
where if you're like, oop, I didn't do
Mm-hmm.
my stack. Uh-oh.
Well,
Um,
and then there's the conversations where we talk about like, well, I would like my family to know that it's a good idea without seeming like I'm a crazy person. Because clearly they think I'm a crazy person at most times when I talk about this thing. And but it was on the Big Bang Theory, so for like 1 week I wasn't a crazy person.
yeah,
I was
yeah.
just a crazy person earlier than the Big Bang Theory figured it out. And like, but I'm like, well, I should figure out a way to just transfer that knowledge. But then it's also like, well, if I act like me, it's gonna be worse. So it's like,
Uh-huh.
which is the way that I can be a good Catholic, good Bitcoiner? Like, should I try? Should I push? Or it's I like I'm being cute with it, but it's also like something I think about a lot
Oh
because like
yeah.
it matters. And it's like it's for people that you care about too. So it's just like, how do you be a good Bitcoiner?
Yeah. No, and it depends on who you ask, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, where people were like, "Oh, you should never buy anything but Bitcoin. Like for the rest of your life, the only thing that you spend money on is Bitcoin." And you're like, "Okay, um,
You're like, but food, and my wife has a cat.
yeah." It's like we have, you know, things like guess what? My kid wants to play baseball, and there's a registration fee, and
Yeah.
I gotta pay it. Like
Hmm.
so. There's limits to you know yeah, it is weird because you almost sit there and like I actually think about it now, like with like how much I've been talking about sports on Twitter, I almost feel like guilty because it's like there's a certain faction of Bitcoin where they're like they call it sports ball, like, oh, ever since I got
Right.
into Bitcoin, I'm not into sports ball anymore because it's so fiat, and I'm like, I mean, yeah, to each his own, but like I find this entertaining. I always have and I always will.
And if we
So
live on Bitcoin Island, then no one that doesn't already live on Bitcoin Island that maybe likes the Steelers would ever move to Bitcoin Island.
mhm.
So yeah, it's weird. I mean, like getting into Twitter stuff, like, I mean, some of it is just like point of view too. So it's just like, you know, that's the thing. Anytime you're a public persona, you start talking about how to curate your point of view as opposed to just like, and I don't even mean it to be like fake or whatever, but just
Yeah.
like what are you trying to project? Because I used to have like, my dad Pression account, like it was like just dad jokes. And then suddenly it was just like, well, I do think Bitcoin is so important. I should just mostly talk about that and money. And it's just like, oh, you have 10,000 less subscribers. So it's like you're making a choice, but you also have to decide like which one is an actual, like your real point of view.
So that's interesting. So you had like 10, you like lost 10,000
I
followers.
lost more than I think I was in the 50s or 60s, and I'm like 31. And some of it could be bots and stuff. But like I was like on all the mommy blogs and like, because it was like I I wasn't bringing this up to try to talk about my Twitter
Yeah.
account that I mostly just try to talk to people that are into Bitcoin now or into finance. But like, yeah, like it's like if you're doing stand-up comedy too, it's about point of view. It's like it doesn't matter if you have the funniest joke. Like if you are the person that looks like, I'm just going to do stereotypes. If you're a person that looks like a construction worker and you tell a very nuanced joke that sounds like it comes from the mouth of Frasier, because apparently I'm old and can only think of 90s sitcoms,
Yeah.
that's not going to work, even if it's the best joke in the world, unless your persona is that always.
Yeah.
And that's also why, like, like if you are, um, you sort of can pick your things that you're going to go into a little bit, and you see that sort of, we've talked about like sort of Bitcoin voices and stuff too,
Hmm.
like so and so is like the Bitcoin like Svengali, and so is the one that talks about bond markets, and it's like that is kind of, and it's like if you were like, I just want to talk about Bitcoin and sports, and like that would probably be an interesting point of view, like just from like a writing or artistic
Yeah.
perspective. And I'm not
Yeah.
telling anybody to like not be who you are, because that's stupid too. It's like,
Yeah.
I'm going to be a fake thing and try to write about it every day, and guess what, my life's going to be horrible. Like that's stupid. But
Uh-huh.
like if you're trying to service multiple masters, and you're like, you don't want to be like the podcast that's just about like, and I'm not talking about your podcast, but
Yeah.
just like every time you hear somebody's like, I'm making a new podcast, you're like, would you just talk about like movies and like stuff we like and stuff we think is cool, and like, and it's just like a list of 47 things.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, but like, are you interested in me because you're interested in George Carlin because he's got some really pointed views about how screwed up the world is and how people are trying to lie to you, and da 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 da. You are interested in Jim Gaffigan because he's like, he's a family man, and like he's got some really good points of view about like what's it like to be in a family, what's it like to be a normal person in America, and like da 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 da. And like during COVID, he said some stuff that I disagreed with, and like that's his prerogative. But I was just like, I am less interested in you.
Uh-huh.
And like, because that was not his persona. And he could have made that decision because he's like, I want to save lives. And, God bless him, even if I disagree with him for saying that. So,
Hmm.
like, when you are like, I have a Twitter account, whether it's like for this podcast or like the Wendy's Twitter account's really good because they're like, we're selling Wendy's, but we're also snarky. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? But then they don't do like a very special episode of Wendy's unless it's snarky. So it's like you have to pick a tone and be that thing, unless you're just like a fun Facebook account for your family to keep up with you. And that's honestly a tone too, because that tone would just be like Corey being real. But like that's different than what an external to the world thing is. So
Yeah.
that's the end of my rant. But yeah, when you take a comedy class too, and when you're in like your 20s and you're like, no, like I'm gonna write the best jokes. And then there's like you take a comedy class, and then like the guy that runs the improv goes like, it's only point of view. I don't care about anything. You're like, 26, this guy's a fuck. And
Yeah.
then you're like 40 and you're like, man, I wish I would have figured that out when I was 26.
Yeah.
And it's true because it's like you even when I watch a TV show and it's like Fringe, like do you remember the show Fringe? They did like a film noir version of Fringe or like whatever show you
Yeah.
do. It's like, oh, what if Seinfeld did this? And you want it to be like the Seinfeldy version. But if
Hmm.
like Seinfeld just does an episode of The Wire that doesn't feel like the Seinfeldy version, it's just like I like The Wire and I like Seinfeld, but you can't cross the streams. This is ridiculous. And then you
Yeah.
just turn the channel. So that's the end of my rant. So it's like you have to pick a voice, understand why you're that voice. And then if you have other good ideas, that's either a parallel account or you give the joke to your friend or you decide, you know what, I'm going to take the hit because this is important to me. And then maybe that's part of your voice as you refine it.
Yeah, I guess maybe I'm curious. What do you think then, thinking about that? Because I have talked about sports so much, and not that like I really care about my following, because like I think it's like cringy whenever people like put like a lot of value in that. And they're like,
No, I completely agree.
I feel like that,
But
like,
but at the same time, you're trying to communicate with people too.
yeah. So it's like it means something, and and I one thing that I was kind of impressed with, the followers is that I haven't been losing them, even though I've been talking about sports, and
Well, I
then
think you're kind of an everyman. Like,
yeah, like that's what I was like. I started to think about. I'm like, maybe it's because like I'm literally just me,
mhm,
like, and I'm just sharing my thoughts as me, and like my thoughts about Bitcoin come off as me,
mhm.
and my thoughts about sports come off as me because it's instead of trying to be like a character,
Right.
like the
Because
Dennis
being
Porters
a
of the
fake
world or
character,
something like that. Like,
unless you're doing it, for some advertising campaign or as a character that you care to write, it's going to run out of steam. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, like
But it's like if you started like having long threads about bond markets and then also talking about the Steelers, there'd be people going, who the fuck is this guy? You know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah,
Which isn't to say that you can't have opinions about both in your life. It would just be like confusing. Like there's a guy that I follow that it is like a finance guy that's like got a pretty big following, and he'll talk about Nebraska every so often, but it's not like he's like really going deep into like Nebraska football. He's just making a comment, and you're like, okay, well, this guy's a person. I like
yeah,
him for being a person. But if he's like, oh man, they need to start playing like a 4-3 defense, and then they've got, and it's just like, dude, just like talk about money. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like it's a weird balance.
yeah. I guess that's weird because then, like, we started this. I mean, really, it was born out of trying to do more live content for Movies Plus. Um, but this guy and I are doing this beer goggle quarterback podcast
Mm-hmm.
where basically at like the end of the week that was in the NFL, we sit down, go through, and like I come up with jokes or whatever. Like we're like doing it like in a funny way, like recapping the NFL. So like when the Kansas City Chiefs lost the opener to the Lions. I was like, the Kansas City Chiefs seemed more like the Kansas City Queefs as they blew hot air all over their audience, and like, um, just going that angle, like, because I was like, like it'll be fun, like, do I need to add another podcast in my life? Like, not necessarily. um,
In your abundant free time.
yeah, exactly.
You're like,
But
I'm turning energy into money, literally. But let me talk about the Chiefs.
yeah, let me talk about what happened in the NFL. Because yeah, it's just like, but it's really, I think it'll be good, and it's good for Movies Plus to have more live content.
Yeah.
And we have other sources for it too. But I was like, well, like if I'm gonna do an NFL one, like it really was born out of the like my one partner and I would like get on the phone. He's one of the partners at Movies Plus. We'd get on the phone last year during the NFL season. In the first like 25 minutes was talking about like what happened in the NFL. And we were like, I was like, oh, we should do a show like or something like that. He's not the one that's doing it, but he was like, I'm not a podcaster, but like you'd be able to do it. So, anyways, um, and then like I was inviting these different like relatively well known accounts, like, hey, would you ever want to come on as like a guest on the podcast? And they were like, yeah, sure. And then they started following me, and then some of them were Steelers related, and so like I don't know if you saw like they have done it twice now, but it was like after week one, that Wednesday night, like I just did like DM'd like a couple of the Steelers like, guys that are like relatively big, and I was like, hey, if I do like a Twitter space tonight called State of the Steelers, would you like
Oh, I've
go?
seen you on there before. Yeah.
And they were like, yeah, sure. And so like well, there were, I don't know, there was like 25 people listening, whatever. And it was just like more like me like talking. It was like local bar talk, like what the hell? They need to do this and fire Matt Canada and blah blah
Well,
blah.
see, I feel like that's something that we're missing too. Maybe not as much from sports, but like local bar talk. Like, I mean, I remember being a kid and going to the bar with my dad, like when they played softball,
Yeah.
like they were not alcoholics. My dad drank a Pepsi and drove us home. But like it was just cool that like, living in the Midwest, it was just like you saw like just adults talking about things and it wasn't scripted and it was like actual opinions and it wasn't just like let me look it up on the internet and have the answer. And I really miss that. And I think
Uh-huh.
that there's a lot of value in what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I think that's what I liked about Twitter Spaces, and like in I liked the beginning of like the Bitcoin Twitter Spaces because it was like it was I don't know, I feel like more of that like casual, like felt like you were sitting around with your friends at the bar like talking like,
Yeah.
oh, like you believe this shit, blah blah blah. And now it's like,
Very formal. It shows and stuff, which there's a
yeah.
place for it. And sometimes I listen to the Swan Show. I think
Hmm.
Alex is a good host, so I got nothing bad to say about it. But you're right. It's different than just like it feels like in technology. Every time we get a new technology, there's this informal thing of like, what if the people could be artists?
Hmm.
And then it's quickly swallowed corporately. And I remember when that happened for YouTube, because I had a sketch group that was like, I mean, we weren't special, but we were like just sometimes we'd get top 100 comedy videos, not top 100 YouTube videos, but top 100 comedy videos. And it was because I like tried really hard to like push it
Yeah.
out and stuff. And it was like there was a lot of like weird, interesting content. And now like they don't even maintain lists like that. And it's just like, what is the new Beyonce video? You know,
Hmm.
let's deplatform him because he says some bad stuff about the government and he had sex 17 years ago. We all know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And like you're right. Like at the beginning of Twitter, it was just like, oh, like I remember listening to, and this was like more formal, but like Mark Cuban got on something, and like people were just, I think it was about Bitcoin, and people were just like,
The Twitter space with
they were like attacking him about stuff, and it
dude,
was
that
just
was
like
that
he
night.
was he was naked and afraid to steal the TV show line because it was just like he had to defend his ideas, and it was like we hadn't figured out the formal structure to keep the normies out yet.
Yeah, that was that night. That I still regret. So that was the Preston Pish hosted the space.
Yeah,
Um,
you know what I'm talking about.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
So like it maybe like a week or so before that, Preston came on my show, and him and I were talking because he's from Pittsburgh too.
Mhm.
So we were like, just having like the generic, like yeah, like the general what every Pittsburgher like when we meet, like like I said, like yins or see each other in the wild, and we're like, um, and so I was like, we talked about Mark Cuban because Mark Cuban's from Pittsburgh,
Mhm.
and we're like, it's like a real bummer, to like see him, hawking like all this other crap.
Yeah.
So, anyways, like a week and a half later, or whatever, I happened to open up Twitter, and like I had remembered earlier in the day, Mark and Preston were going back and forth on Twitter, like, and he was like, Preston was like, arguing with him about like why like all the other things are garbage, um, and then
Correctly so.
yeah, and then so instead of keep going back on Twitter, all of a sudden I see Preston opened up a Twitter space, and it happened like right whenever I opened Twitter. So like I just like hopped in, and he added me to the stage, and like we were like the only two. This might have been where you and I connected maybe originally. Like if I
I
think
think
about
I
it.
learned about you from My Movies Plus. Like I
Okay.
saw a bunch of crap you were doing, and I was like, I'm in film, and this guy, and I heard you on some podcasts. Sorry to interrupt your
Yeah, no,
story,
no.
but I was like, this guy's doing like important stuff, and he's a lot like me, and I was like, I need to just I am him and just try to be his friend because
Yeah.
like I was very similar, and then and like you had the like here when I worked in production stories and stuff, and I
Oh
was
man, yeah. You can relate to that.
yeah,
Only if
exactly. But
you
anyway, so
were
you
in
were
there
talking
for
about
me.
Preston and you being in this chat.
So yeah, so I remember and I remember this other guy like joined, and um and he kind of like, I should have said something and been like, "Hey, Preston, I'll co-host," because Preston was like, "I don't know what to do. How do I do this?" He had like never done it, and but the other guy was like, "Let me co-host," and then he got like, as it grew, he brought up like Pomp, and he brought up, you know, like Peter McCormick and everybody, and I was like, no, like
It just
this
immediately
should
turned,
be
yeah,
Preston and Mark talking. This shouldn't be
yeah.
anyone else. Nobody
Hmm.
else needs to be having, but it was like I remember sitting there because like we had all of a sudden the space had like grown to like 1,000 people. And so I was sitting there, and Preston's like, oh, he's like, I mean, how do we get Mark to join? And I literally said, I was like, everybody in the audience right now, hit the share button
Yep.
and then tag Mark Cuban, and he's going to get flooded with 1,000 notifications just for this.
That was a wise idea.
And that's exactly what happened. Then he joined,
You
and
summoned him.
I know, like I was like, it actually worked. And then, but then it be like as soon as Mark was in, it was funny because like Mark joined in, and Preston was like, "Oh, I think Mark's in," and I was like, "Oh, here we go, Steelers." Um and Preston was like, "Mark, I bet you didn't know I was from Pittsburgh," and he was like, "No, I couldn't tell at all from your guys' accents." Um and then like they started talking, and they were doing their thing, but like obvious, like I said, like Peter McCormick and everybody that's a Bitcoiner
Yeah.
influencer of some sort, like hurried up, fired up their phone, and like, I got to get a part of this to engage, and you
Yeah.
know, and then it just became this thing where they
It's
were
like
all
everybody was
like,
at fucking Deion Sanders' football game.
yeah, and it was just like I was like, guys, like this is this should be Preston versus Mark, not
Yeah.
even like verse, but like there's just a conversation, and it became this thing because like then like I mean Peter McCormick, God love him, I think he's a good dude.
I do
Um,
too. There's
but
stuff I
like,
like and stuff I don't, but I totally have a beer with that guy. Good for
oh yeah,
him.
hell yeah, hell yeah. But like, he, like it devolved to the point where he was like, Mark, how about I'll bet you, $100,000 that something's gonna happen or whatever. I was like, oh my God, like
Yeah.
this is where the Preston high intellectual conversation with Mark Cuban, where he could
Yeah.
have really made an argument. It really like derailed. And yeah, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I forget where we're going with that, but like I guess the beginning of Twitter Spaces was like
Mhm.
that, and people, it was like raw and new. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, now like I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there are some Bitcoiners that'll unfollow me just because I'm being sacrilege and talking about sports. But I was like, that's not, like I'm obsessed with it. Like I love it. Like I think it's fun, and
Yeah.
also so like we've done like 2 weeks in a row of like Twitter Spaces, and like these people are like, hey, like make sure you do it again next week. I'm like, all right, because it's something that I'm like sitting there so pissed off watching the game, and like my wife is like, I love you, but I'm so sick, and she's a Steelers fan, but she's like, I don't need to hear you talk about this over and over and over again. um
He's like, do something productive. Why
yeah.
is your name on a mug that's on the wall in a place that you don't live? And you're like, I'm glad I married you. You're right about all those things.
Thank you so much for marrying me. I think you're hot.
Thank you for just giving me a shot. And now you're locked in because we got blood between us with the kids.
Like, doesn't it suck for you how I turned out? Like, like, I always
You're
joke.
like, and then every so often you're like, you know what? Well, I'm turning in energy into money, so I'm bringing some value too.
The value proposition here is through the roof. Who else is gonna cut the grass?
Pretty good, yeah.
Nobody's gonna cut the grass. I do that. I cut the grass. Good luck.
I
Good luck
shovel the
chlorinating that
snow.
pool in the summer. Nobody's gonna chlorinate that pool. I'm the one that does it.
Yeah.
Um,
I remember telling my wife, like, we live on the corner, so we have extra sidewalk, and I'm like shoveling the sidewalk, and she's like, why are you shoveling the sidewalk? And I'm like, so we don't get a ticket.
yeah,
I'm saving us the ticket and the embarrassment. And she's like, oh, and I'm like, yeah, it's a good thing you got a man in your life.
yeah. And the big burly man like us, where we just
I'm from the Midwest. I'm not a hippie from California. I know about this shoveling deal.
I know the responsibility a man has to have when it comes to shoveling. A
Yeah.
man's got to shovel. Um, but um, I think it's like peels back to like being a bad Bitcoiner, and you're like, so I don't know. I mean, people might care or not care that I'm like talking about sports, because well, then it's like weird, because then it evolved. Because I was like, oh, I'm gonna do this like Steelers or no, like NFL podcast, and then I know some comedians, and there's this one comedian who's formerly, like, he hasn't lived in Pittsburgh in 25 years, but um uh he was on Bill Burr's Bill Burr presents uh like Nothing But Killers special that was on Netflix.
Nice. Bill Burr's
um
the best.
his name's Joe Bartnick. And he does a hockey podcast. Like, he's obsessed with hockey,
Mhm.
uh and so I was like, I reached this one Penguins hockey writer uh was like interacting with me, and so I DM'd him and I said, hey, I'm doing this like Steeler stuff. Would you ever do like hop on and do like a Penguin hot like Twitter space with me? And I was like, I know Joe Bartnick, so I was like, I know that if I get like if you're down for it, like I can get Joe Bartnick to join. And he was like, oh yeah, absolutely, let's do that. So I texted Joe, and he was like, oh hell yeah, that's awesome, let's do it. So now it's like, I mean, it'll probably be in like a week or so. do like a hockey one, and it's, I don't know, maybe it'll annoy some people. I don't know. But then like I even told the people in the Twitter space for the Steelers this week, I was like, they were all like started following me. I was like, FYI, I'm a Bitcoiner and I'm like, own a movie platform and I'm obsessed with Pittsburgh sports in Michigan college. It's like, so like those are the things you're going to get from me. Like, so you're following me now, but like it's not going to be pure Steeler stuff. It's you're going to get a bunch of stuff, and people were like, "Oh, that's cool." Yeah, I was like, "All right, whatever." Like, but yeah, and I know that there's like this big. The reason I'm talking about it is because I know there's this Bitcoiner faction of like, well, it's like sports ball. Like, who cares about that anymore?
It's interesting though, because it's like there's a difference between like I'm all about the meme when it's like, what are we gonna get our bread and circuses? And they show like the Roman Coliseum, and then they show whatever the stadium is that they played football at that
Yeah,
day, and they look the same. And it's like, yeah, guess what? If you're not paying attention to what's happening in the world, and your kid is gonna suffer because of that, boo on you. But it's also like sports is awesome, and like in a world where like we didn't have sociopaths that were trying to make us eat bugs and crickets, which are also bugs,
mm-hmm.
then we could just teach our sons how to play baseball and watch our kids' baseball game and talk to our community, and then like go home and watch the Tigers or the Pirates. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
and that's a beautiful world too. So it's like there's like this balance of like you know it's good that like you are a Bitcoiner that like actually is a normal human being, like how other normal human beings just want to play catch with their kid and then watch the Steelers. You know what I mean?
instead of
But then
like
it's
being like
also
a
like,
zealot.
yeah, but it's also like it's not like you're just rolling over and dying and going like, nope, I'm not gonna try to make any money. I'm just gonna watch the Steelers. I'm not gonna try to find out anything that's true. I'm just gonna see how their defense unfolds. You know what I mean? Like I think that there needs to be more nuanced points of view like that, because like you're right, like the sports ball thing just totally turns people off. And I had a friend that was like that, and then like 10 years later I'm like, well, he did have some points, but he sure did deploy them to me poorly, which is maybe how I am telling my family about Bitcoin. Like maybe I
Mm-hmm.
could learn from that scenario.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. By the way, you mentioning the Tigers, did you see Miguel Cabrera, one of the greatest hitters of all time, longtime Tiger, for anyone that doesn't know, is retiring this year, and he's going around, and like whenever you're an all-time great, like your last time playing at different places, they give you, like, oh, here's a token, here's a thing to remember you
Yeah.
by.
A
Like,
hot dog from our stand.
yeah. And like the last time he played in Los Angeles, it was like the Dodgers gave him like a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
I did not
Um,
know that.
yeah. And then the funniest was last night, um, they were playing in Oakland against the Athletics, and Oakland gave him like an $80 bottle of wine. And they were like, people, I mean, like, if you don't know baseball, like the Athletics are like the cheapest organization. It is. And then like this, there's somebody that's like a athletics fan on Twitter that, has a following or whatever. And they had made a joke like earlier in the summer. They're like, watch like the Athletics give him like some bum ass bottle of wine. Like, and like it actually came true. Um, but yeah, it just made me think of that. But
I love
yeah.
Ace fans, by the way. I went to a couple Ace games when I lived in LA because it's like the Tigers were playing.
Oh
And
yeah.
I sat in the bleachers, and when they would sing Take Me Out to the Ball Game, they would sing, If They Don't Win, It's the Same. And I would love them forever for that. And then there was another guy that just wore a Raiders shirt that like they called him Raider Bob. And I don't know if he knew what sport he was at, but like the couple times I went, Raider Bob was there, and he had a lot of opinions. But
Speaking
yeah,
of,
poor Oakland, because they're going to lose that team and
yeah, I know.
some good fans.
I know. It's a shame. Um, it's just so weird that they're going to Las Vegas just like the Raiders. Um, you know,
I don't understand people that cheer for a team that moved because
yeah.
that's like cheering for a girl that dumped you to do good with the next guy. It's like, yeah, like we had a good run and like she's got two kids with him and like I check her Facebook every day and I live and die by that
Yeah.
Facebook. It's
I
like, dude,
really I really hope that everything works out in her
hope
life.
it
Like
works out. Like, and I just want to be a part of it. It's like, dude, you're not a part of it. She dumped you for money because he's a stock trader. Like,
but
it
speaking
wasn't
of
for the
like
community.
thinking about like the fiat mind of sports, I think about this all the time, but like how absurd the whole like stadium thing is,
Oh yeah, I hate that.
where they're like, well, we need a new one. And you're like, I mean, this one's only like, for example, the Pirates in uh played at a Forbes Field where if they had like renovated it and kept it up, it would honestly be like a Wrigley Field,
Mhm.
Fenway Park type thing, where it was like, oh, it was so cool and had all these, nuances and like stepping back in time. Um, but they in 1970 opened Three Rivers Stadium. Um, and that was like one of the I don't know if you've ever seen a picture of Three Rivers Stadium, but it was like one of those generic ones that was literally a circle.
I vaguely remember it because it was kind of crappy.
Yeah, and they were all like the same, like Cincinnati's baseball, football stadium. It was one of those. It could be
Yeah.
baseball and
It was
football.
like the 70s. We can have fake grass.
Exactly, and it was like carpet, and it was like concrete that people got tackled onto, and
Yeah, people blew out their knees and yeah.
um, but like the Cincinnati had a stadium. It looked exactly the same. Philadelphia's the vet looked exactly the same, and it was like one of those things where it was like a fad. So this 1970. This Pirates and Steelers moved out of the stadium into their own stadiums in 2000, 2001.
Right.
Um, so the stadium was around for 30 years. And I was always like, wow, like, I mean, that was really old. And now you look at, like, I think the Titans, who have been in Tennessee for like maybe 25 or 26 years, and they're getting a new stadium. And you're like, I didn't think their stadium looked that garbage. Like the reason for me, I was even as a kid, I was like, I understand the Pirates leaving because like it was like the ones that all had the same stadium, the Pirates, the Reds, and the Phillies all left those stadiums and within like a handful of years, and it was
The
like,
Tigers left Tiger Stadium in 99 or 2000 for
wow,
Comerica too. So same, yeah.
yeah, same timeline. So it's like, but like those ones that were those generic like 1970s. Hey, look, you can. It's a circle, and you can make it football and baseball and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Um, it's like, okay, I get it. You guys tried to jump on this like thing that you thought was going to be the thing of the future,
Mhm.
and it clearly was garbage. But so like, yeah, you move into your stadium. This is going to be your home forever. And then like there's like rumors, not like rumors, and I don't like they're probably just angling for more money, but they're like the Steelers might leave Heinz Field, and like ask like they need a new stadium, and you're like, holy shit, like this stadium's 23 years old, like so like does that mean in 7 years like both teams are gonna need new stadiums,
Yeah.
and it's like, well, PNC Park, if you haven't been to PNC Park, that one will never get replaced. That's like literally the best baseball stadium, and I'm not being
I
just
would
a
love to
homer.
go there because it does look beautiful.
It is incredible. They just have an advantage that, like, with the being right on the river and the
Mhm.
whole city being right across the river, like it's like downtown part of the city. I mean, but
San Diego's worth your time too if you've got a chance to go to that one.
oh
So
yeah, I got to go there. But so I don't think that'll go anywhere. But then again, the thing about this from like a fiat Bitcoin mindset, where like how effed up is it that these organizations are like, hey, we need taxpayer dollars to pay for this
Yep.
building that then we own.
Yeah, and
Um,
then it's a real estate scam.
yeah.
The I listened to a podcast similarly about what we're talking about, and I wish I remember which one because it was one of the best podcast episodes I ever listened to just like learn about life. And it was like baseball prospectus or an effectively wild or one of those good baseball
Hmm.
podcasts. And this is also part of like when we're talking about like sports ball. It's like, no, you can learn real stuff from sports ball. You just have to
Hmm.
like pay attention to the right thing. And they were talking about the minor league stadium scam. And the base what happens is, you know, some people come into a city and they tell some politicians, hey, you guys need to get a new stadium, otherwise we're going to move.
Hmm.
Or they're the ones that are already there. Or like, hey, if you get a new stadium, we'll move our team here. And then they finance it over like, 10, 20 years. And the team moves there. And the politicians are only going to be in charge for like, 5 to 7 years.
Hmm.
So it doesn't have to be a good deal. It just has to be a good deal like the politician
Outlast
gets
their
credit
political
for like
career.
I brought the Rancho Quakes to Rancho, which is a good stadium. If you live in California, you should totally check that out. Um, and it's like, oh, look at I get to be in all these pictures and stuff, and then they're out of office, and then it's like year 20 on the stadium or year 10, and then the same thing goes, well, if we don't get a new stadium, there's a billion other cities in the US, not a billion, but like what 200 or whatever that are the
Hmm.
right size, we'll just move to Carolina. And it is similar to what you're talking about for the NFL and for Major League Baseball, that it's easier to understand because it's like we're going to get a bunch of free crap from you that you're going to pay for after we leave. And it doesn't matter to us the long-term value proposition of this. And from the pro perspective, it's like you get into sort of the whole like fiat financing, especially when it was low interest rates. And it's like, well, we're gonna get like this like Comerica Park. It's in like downtown Detroit, and we're gonna build the Fox. We're gonna have like the Fox Theater and Ford Field, and this is gonna be like the It Strip. We're gonna pay for it over like 20 or 30 years. And
Hmm.
I'm not specifically talking about those finances because I don't know exactly what it is. And it's like, and the ownership owns the building exactly like you said, and then like the city's gonna pay for like highways to go right to it. It's like, yeah, if I buy a farm in the middle of nowhere and the city pays for highways to go to my farm, and then I decide to put like anything on it, you're a business person, anything
Hmm.
that's not a farm, people can get to there better and it's worth more money than before the highways were. And you're absolutely right. It's like a total scam and I hate it. And it's like, well, they'll move. And it's just like that's the part where it's like it would break my heart if the Tigers moved from Detroit ever. But it's like I don't want if I actually care about that place, I don't want them to spend like $250 million
Hmm.
and not have some. It's like don't negotiate with terrorists kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh yeah, we'll take your team, and you're like,
yeah,
so it's like part of it. You're like, you feel bad for Oakland, but you're like, well, you know, like, hats off to you for actually sticking it to the. I mean, because it's an absurd, you
yeah,
know, like, they used tax dollars to
hmm,
build Heinz Field in PNC Park and
yeah. And
PPG
if my
Paints
team
Arena.
ever moved, I think I'd just be done. Like I would like baseball in general, like the sport of baseball. Like maybe
Hmm.
baseball is worse than college football or something, But like I would like, when I saw kids playing baseball, I'd feel good, but I wouldn't be
Yeah,
like, oh, I need to pay money to Major League Baseball for them to like,
yeah,
it's just like at some point, like the short-term profit, like I'm not going to pass this. My kid, like I said, doesn't like sports, but if he did, I'm not going to intentionally pass this to my child, like how my dad did to me, because it's
yeah,
like, it's just they held me hostage and then I didn't get built. So the end.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. It's there's so much wrong with like fiat, the sports perspective, like looking at fiat. Um, I mean, like how everybody, like, Joe Burrow just signed. They're like, oh, he's the richest. It's the highest paid player in the history of the NFL. It's like literally that happens twice a year where
Yeah, because
somebody
of
signs a contract.
inflation.
Yeah, and they're like, "Can you like?" I mean, I remember. Well, let's see. I think let me look it up real quick. Joe Burrow contract. Let's see. Joe
Yeah, people don't
Burrow.
understand that like professional athletes are essentially scarce luxury goods. It's like signing a Picasso. And I don't mean that Joe Burrow is like a beautiful work of art, but it's like there's only so many people that can do that thing. And if you need a person to do that thing and to market,
Then
you
you gotta
pay or you
pay it.
don't.
Yeah, here's the absurd. So I remember the Steelers signed Ben Roethlisberger to an extension. He was like they were like, wow, he's $100 million man, and it was for like 10 years. So like $10 million a year or something, $15
Mhm.
million. Yeah, I forget what the exact total was. Joe Burrow's contract that he just signed was for $275 million for 5 years. $55 million. So like even I remember when Alex Rodriguez left Seattle and signed
Texas,
with
like
Texas, and it was
252 or something like that.
a 10-year contract for a
Yep.
quarter of $1 billion. I can still remember my math teacher, and I don't think I was in ninth grade. My math teacher sitting there reading the newspaper, going, "Quarter of $1 billion." And
Did
like
you
he
know there
just
was a
kept saying
soccer
it.
player that got offered? He didn't take it, and I don't remember his name. I'm sure you can find it from Google, but he got offered like $1 billion to play for 1 year in the UAE. Like,
Really?
yeah, like the UAE is doing some nuts stuff right now, and I only kind of tangentially am aware of
Understand
it, so
what's
I
going?
could be
Yeah.
saying it wrong. But I don't think because we're talking about the fiat system collapsing and stuff, and they're not necessarily. I don't think that they're buying U.S. bonds in the same way that they were before to recycle their dollars from oil.
Mm-hmm.
So they're spending money on other luxury goods like entertainment thing, like not frittering it away, but making other investment type things. So they've taken some runs at some soccer players for like just stupid money, but it makes sense because it's like we were saying, like where do you put your money? Well, if they're not going to spend $1 billion in Bitcoin, it's like, well, what do? You make it so that the UAE becomes Singapore and people want to come to that city as Singapore and come and drop their money. And so like what do you need for that? And then, great soccer players or, all the other infrastructure that, entertainment and blah blah blah. It's crazy. But it makes sense because you're like, look at what happened. Like, look at what cheeseburgers cost when Alex Rodriguez signed that $250 million contract. And look at what cheeseburgers cost now.
Yeah. It's
And it's
like,
like, well, somebody should be making $1 billion.
I guess that makes sense. It's just when you get into like an inflationary, like once you get out of the inflationary environment or understand that it's bullshit.
Yeah. We're not setting
It
records of like how much life you can live for the money. It's just like the money's melting down.
Yeah, it's just like it's one of those things. It's like you can't unsee it. Like once you see it, you're like, oh, that's effed.
And then your family and friends have not seen it. And you're like, you're the person trying to feed them with a fire hose because you're like, there's all this crazy shit that I want to tell you. And it's just really hard to like package that in a way that is palatable, How do I
Yeah,
sneak it into your dog food?
yeah. Like just try and take it. Oh,
Why
well,
are the Saudis spending $1 billion on soccer players?
if
It's like, well, there's real
anyone,
world reasons that actually is interesting and relates to your life, but you just sound like the guy that's yelling about the Saudis spending $1 billion on a soccer player.
yeah,
And the guy
yeah.
said no.
That's insane that he said no. I will
Yeah,
go
he's
play
on
soccer
track.
for $1 billion for a
Yeah, he's
year.
probably doing okay.
Yeah, I'd probably find a way to do it. Oh shit. Well, Paul, we probably should wrap it up because it's been a long one, and I
It's been
probably kept you
fun.
up too late.
Thanks
But
for having me.
yeah, everyone go get a BitBox O2 hardware wallet, and we will talk to you guys next time.
Bye, guys.